As a myth, Marxism tells us the story of the original state of paradise, primitive communism, which was gradually lost, the initial division of labor, and the stratification of primitive society. Then the contradictions grew, moving toward the point when, at the end of this world, they were reincarnated, in their most paradigmatically pure form, as a confrontation between labor and capital. Capital, the bourgeoisie and liberal democracy, personified global evil, exploitation, alienation, lies, and violence. Labor embodied the great dream and an ancient memory of the common good, and its acquisition, the surplus value, by an evil minority, gave birth to all the problems of modern life. Labor, the proletariat, must recognize the paradoxes inherent in this state of affairs and rise up against their masters in order to build a new society, a new paradise on earth, communism. Only this will not be the naturally occurring primitive communism, but an artificial, scientific kind, in which the differential, accumulated over centuries and millennia of alienation, will serve the commune, the community. In this way, the dream will become a reality. This myth fits neatly into the structure of eschatological consciousness, which occupies a significant place in mythologies of all tribes and peoples, not to mention the highly differentiated religions. That alone speaks in its favor in order for us to treat it with the utmost consideration. On the other hand, as sociology, Marxism is tremendously useful in revealing those mechanisms of alienation and mystification that liberalism uses to justify its dominion and is proof of its correctness. Being a myth itself in its polemical, activist form, Marxism serves as an excellent tool to expose the bourgeoisie great stories in order to overthrow the credibility of liberal pathos. And, in this capacity, against liberalism, it can be used effectively under the new conditions. After all, we continue to exist under capitalism, and hence, Marxist criticism of it and the struggle against it remain on the agenda, even if the old forms of the struggle have become irrelevant. Marxism is often correct when it describes its enemy, especially the bourgeoisie. However, its own attempts to understand itself lead to failure. The first and the most prominent contradiction is Marx's unfulfilled prediction about the type of societies that are the most prone to socialist revolutions. He was confident that this would take place in the greatly industrialized countries of Western Europe, which had a high level of manufacturing and contained a large proportion of urban proletariat. Such revolutions were considered impossible in agrarian countries, as well as those countries with an Asiatic mode of production, due to their supposed backwardness. In the 20th century, everything occurred exactly to the contrary. Socialist revolutions and socialist societies developed in agrarian countries which had a traditional rural population, while nothing similar occurred in any of the highly developed nations of Europe and America. However, even in those countries where socialism was victorious, Marx's dogma did not allow for a rethinking of its basic logical assumptions, such as to reconsider the role of pre-industrial factors or to honestly evaluate the real power of myth. In its Western and Soviet versions, Marxism's self-reflection turned out to be questionable and inaccurate. While justifiably criticizing liberalism, Marxism was seriously mistaken about itself, which, at some point, doomed its own fate. It eventually collapsed even in those places where it had triumphed, and in those areas where Marx had expected it to win, capitalism prevailed. The proletariat dissolved into the middle class and disappeared inside the consumer society, contrary to expectations and predictions. In the end, European revolutionary communists turned into petty bourgeoisie clowns, entertaining the bored and jaded democratic public. If Marxism itself was unable to look at itself from the proper standpoint, then nothing prevents us from doing so in the context of the fourth political theory. Alain de Benoit had a classic book entitled Vue de droite, A View from the Right, in which he suggested the rereading of various political writers, both from the right and the left, from the point of view of the New Right. This book led to the inception of the New Right movement in Europe. It contains not only a critique of those ideas, which served as a dogma for the old right, but also a revolutionary and well-meant reading of such authors as the communist Antonio Gramsci, examined from the point of view of the right. It is precisely this reading of Marx from the right, from the standpoint of myths, and from archaic and holistic sociology that would be particularly fitting at the present time.